So going back to the early 70s and the heyday of the early martial arts movies, Bruce Lee era, I was, you know, 10, 11 years old. And, that's originally how I got involved in the martial arts and watching the Bruce Lee movies and stuff like that. And my other favorite one was Billy Jack. And so that kind of got me my first interest into the martial arts. And around 1976, I started taking a martial art called Hwarang-Do. It was a Korean-style martial art. So I had a background of Korean-style martial arts. And then not long after that, I started a little bit of boxing. And then we started doing I started doing point tournaments. And from that point, it started to evolve more into full contact karate. And there was what was called the PKA karate, the kick of the 80s, that was going on around that time. They were going from doing point tournament contact with karate chop gloves on to full contact. And so I was around during this evolution of the early stand-up fighting sports. And so in the early 80s, I turned amateur around 1980 and had my first amateur competition. And by around my eighth or ninth fight, I was given an opportunity by a local promoter to do a Muay Thai fight. And we knew very little about Muay Thai style fighting. And all I knew is that they used knees and elbows as well. We were just used to doing karate style, punching and kicking. And so the promoter said, "Hey, you want to do this?" He was eager, I said, "Yeah, doesn't everybody?" I thought, but apparently it wasn't many people doing it. And he goes, "Hey, well, I'll set you up a fighter because there's not many people that want to do that." So now, according to this promoter, Danny Rodarte, he said I was the first one to fight full Muay Thai rules in the state of California. So as far as I know, I haven't heard anybody say anything different. So I was among the first people to do that style of fighting. So I fought as an amateur, and that was 1982. And then I turned pro in 1983. In our first couple fights, we had these Thai promoters that were trying to bring Muay Thai to the United States, and we were the first Americans, to kind of do, we were the guinea pigs to to test ourselves out against these fighters, supposedly from Thailand. The first ones were from Thailand; they were from Laos, and we ended up knocking them all out. Our whole team, we knocked them all out. So the next fight, the next promoter that saw us compete in that, he wanted us to get it. He wanted to bring in some real fighters from Thailand, and I kind of doubted if they were the real thing. I thought we were just going to end up beating them all again. But they ended up bringing some real fighters from Thailand. Insi Noi, a guy named Khao Sad, and this was around the time of when Diesel Noi was getting real famous. He was a famous fighter from Thailand. So apparently this was the glory days in Thailand too, in the 80s. When they were, the Hapalong Gym in Thailand, and they were just starting to, a lot of international fighters were starting to fight fighters in Thailand. And the Dutch fighters were going to Thailand on a regular basis and competing against them. And so I fought this guy in Sinoi, and I went the distance with him when he was supposed to slaughter me. And it was all Thai crowd, but even the Thais there were booing him, saying, because they didn't expect me to last a round with this guy. So I went the distance with him, and it was a surprise kind of for both of us in there. He never fought a karate-style fighter that was that strong, and I never fought anybody who was that strong in a clinch with the knees as well. So that was among the early days, and I was with Benny the Jet Rakitas and his team in Los Angeles, in Van Nuys, California. And around that time, of course, Benny was one of the first people to fighting international rules. But he was fighting the Japanese a lot. He was going to Japan and beating all their top kickboxers. It wasn't full Muay Thai rules, though. He was fighting with modified rules. And he was beating a lot of all their guys. Benny did have some trouble with some genuine Thai fighters, though. And so the Thais were the ones to beat. And so going on to mid 80s through the early 90s, I was at the Jet Center, and the sport was evolving. And around somewhere around 1995, there was rumors that Benny was going to fight. That he was challenged by this no rules style of fighting, of which that match they were trying to get going was actually Benny and Royce Gracie, which would have been the first kind of UFC fight, but it actually ended up being Dan Severn, I believe, ended up fighting Royce Gracie. So I was there at the very start of what has become now the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting, and MMA has just turned into a huge sport. So I got to see that evolution, and so I got to experience a lot of different styles. I really experienced the best in a number of different styles, the best karate style fighters, the best Muay Thai style fighters, and then I also have a background in boxing. So, and also that era of the 80s was a great heyday for boxers as well. It was Leonard, Hearns, Duran, and all these great fighters coming up, these great just showdowns, So I got to see the best of that, and I got into boxing as well. Let's see, around the late 90s, there was some fighters. There was a trainer that came from Holland, from among the best Dutch style fighters in Holland and that whole area. They were the only ones that were really giving the Thais real trouble, even beating a lot of them in Thailand. And so I got to train with one of the very best from the Majuro Gym in Holland, and I got to learn that style as well. So I know two styles of Muay Thai, and I have a background in boxing, and I have a background in martial arts. So that's my striking kind of background. And so what I'm going to want to do is share a little bit of my experience. Later we're going to share some videos on my analysis of the different fighters today in the UFC, and what I'm looking for the ultimate fighter, because that's what it's all about, the ultimate fighter, the best that can put it all together and and be what the ultimate fighter is supposed to be, really good at everything. So future videos I'm going to be sharing a lot about that. So
Who's your number one pick right now?
Don't